Thank you for joining me, Anthony, on this coffee break, but as you can contest, some days it's just too hot to have coffee.
Yep. Or this evening is too warm to have coffee. Yep.
So I've been thinking a lot about Final Fantasy VI, which I believe you introduced me to, not the other way around, right?
That makes sense. I think it was introduced to me by a mutual friend.
I have a theory I want to run by you.
Okay.
I believe that Taylor Hartford is the main character
No,
because
Brantford.
I believe Taylor Branford is the main character of Final Fantasy VI. The reason for this is because when you start the game, you start with Terra, Wedge, and Biggs in the mechs, and then if you finish the game without her in your party, she'll show up. She's at the beginning and the end of the game. She bookmarks the game. That's one point for her being the main character. Another point for her being the main character is the finding of her is what the Emperor leads the Empire on its route of magic tech and magic infused source people such as Kefka, who ends up being the big bad of the whole game. We don't know that when you start the game, but Kefka. So without Terra, the game wouldn't happen at all. Therefore, she is the main character of the game.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. In my opinion, Tara definitely feels like the main character. Uh, or and I think you were going to allude to this, but there's a trio of possible answers. But come on, the main character of Final Fantasy VI is my favorite character, Strigo.
Are you sure it's not Kefka, the main character?
Well, no, Kefka is definitely the villain. Um, so Kefka's the villain.
But a
Terra.
villain can be a
So
main character, though.
well, he's the main
I'm
antagonist.
not talking
I
about.
would.
I'm not talking about mechanic wise. I'm talking about story wise. Kefka is the main character.
That is an interesting twist. If you want to think about it that way, but we don't get any backstory to Kefka,
I guess we.
whereas we do kind of get a backstory to Terra and Celeste, or Cells, as I grew up pronouncing her name, uh, and even you get a bit of backstory for about Locke.
I guess Kefka. I guess the main argument against Kefka being the main character of the game is he doesn't have enough screen time.
Yeah, but again, that's why I think of him as the main antagonist. He definitely pushes the story forward. He becomes the big bad evil, but he's definitely he's definitely what glues this ragtag group of 13 to 14 to 15 to 16. Well, no, I guess it's at what the most 14 characters together.
Only two of them are optional, right? Gogo and Umaro.
Well, Gogo and Yumaro are completely optional. Uh, I'm not sure if Mog might also be optional because, like, yes, you have to play as Mog when very early on in the game, but I don't think he's a forced character to take later on in the game.
Speaking of Taylor being the main character of the game, I don't think Taylor's background is avoidable when playing the game. I think it's kind of part of the plot of the game is Taylor's background.
So, yeah, well, that's completely true because when we get the backstory of between I believe the Esper's name is Madween or Madim. Uh, I don't remember what the human's woman's name is, but yes, I do believe that is an unavoidable story skip that another friend of ours actually caused him to quit the game because it took too long to get through.
The only other person I could see, there's only two other ways I could see. If Taylor's not the main character, there's only two other options I could see. Either the ones that you need to get to the final island, those three, or Locke himself being the main character. Because you learn a lot about Locke. I feel is the one that you learn the most about his history in the game.
Yep. Well, and I think they each. So I think Tara is going through self exploration and questioning. What is her purpose? With the fact that she's half Esper, half human. She has to figure that out. So do we, and she has to learn to cope with this new identity. You get Locke, who's he's just a regular human adventurer. Um, he's he's not special. He's a liberator of goods, or whatever term you want to give him. But he's the everyday man, and he definitely is the glue that holds all the characters together, or some of the characters together. And I think we get to see the world through his eyes, or it's easier to see the world through his eyes.
Who are the three characters you need to beat the game besides the guy that owns the airship and sells? Who's the third one?
Uh, so the only three are, so you start in the Brave New World as Celeste or Cells, and then you move on to, I believe the second character you get is Setzar, uh, with his airships. I could be wrong about that. I believe the only other character that's absolutely mandatory is King of Figaro.
What about the argument that King Figaro, Salas, and Setsa are the main character? What are your thoughts on that argument?
Um, so I think Cells plays an important role as well. I think, like, much like Terra, she's magically inclined. She she's another she doesn't she needs to find her place after being abandoned by the Empire. Again, you have she has to learn, what family is in the new world with Sid, and depending on what you choose as a player, she either has to learn how to cope with loss, or to go out and to go out there for her friends. um Setzar, I believe he's another secondary character, but he's very important. Again, he is your ride in both worlds. But you do get his backstory, the second ship from his previous love. um you don't get as much of a backstory. And again, he is the pilot, and I wouldn't necessarily say he is the main character. And then King of Fingaro, also known as Agar or Ejar, or however I know we definitely mispronounced his names growing up. Um, but Agar, he's your connection to the underground, to the rebellion, and he's that formalized connection. He plays both parties. He is the Lando Calrissian, if of the Final Fantasy VI world, where he's in bed with the Empire, but he's also part of the Resistance, and trying to keep up that facade, to his own interests. Um, He's the ladies' man, but I find out of all of the secondary characters, we get a bit of his backstory of him and Sabine. You get a bit of their backstory, but other than right at the beginning, like everything, all of his expose, I believe, is all in the first world. We don't learn anything new about him in the second world, and I think that's what kind of holds him back from being the a main character. Well, the main character, but I would argue he is a main character.
If you speedrun the game, you end up at the final boss fight with only 4 characters. So how are there more than 4 main characters of the game?
Well, I think it's not necessarily like there is a main character there. I would say like Tara is probably the focal point if you let her be the focal point of the story, and then the other characters add on to it. And I think that's what's so great about Final Fantasy VI is, or Final Fantasy III when we grew up with the SNES, that these characters, as they like there's again like there's a whole 14 of them, and I think you know outside of 3 or 4 of them we get a bit of backstory. We get we understand why they're part of this fight. None of these are just a soldier that is if they die we feel nothing for them. Like the closest to that we don't really know much about are Gogo and Yumaro. While Yumaro is a Yeti, I don't know if there's much more to know about him than that. But even characters like smaller characters like Shadow, Realm, and Strigo, you get an interconnected story between those three if you let that play out.
So to sum up here, do you believe that the main characters are whom exactly?
So Terra, for me, in my opinion, Terra is main character one, and then to support Terra, or to support the story and understand the world, you get in this order, I believe, Locke, Celeste, and you get Agar.
So the gambler isn't really a main character in your opinion.
I believe he's a secondary character, in my humble opinion. And how about you? What is your order?
I have to think about it, but the argument for Terra being the main character is pretty strong, you have to admit.
Yep.
Well, well, coffee break's over. We'll have to. I'll see you next time we have a coffee break together.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.